Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here. I actually just recorded this entire video, about 25-ish minutes of it, with my mic muted. So I get to record it a second time. So, yeah, it's pretty sick. But what's going on, guys? Today, I guess tonight, I want to talk to you all a bit about the Destro Lock reversions that were announced by Blizzard earlier today. Maybe yesterday, depending on whenever this video goes up. What it means, talk a bit about the sims that came out over the past 48 hours that are mostly irrelevant, but there is one change that's still being made to sims, which might actually yield a bit of a DPS increase in sims, and then just sort of give my take on the whole situation. Now, for those of you who didn't see, I did indeed talk to Max yesterday a bit on his stream about the Destro Lock nerfs and a couple other topics, which is pretty cool. But there's a lot of hot takes on the reversions. Some are happy, some aren't, and I think it's both a good thing, a bad thing, but also a thing that could lead to hopefully something good down the line. So, any WeakORS add-ons or profiles you see in this video, link down below to my Twitch. You can grab them for free. I'll swing by, hang out, grab them, ask any questions anytime. Feel free to do so. Before we get into the video, I also want to give one shout out to my patrons. Thank you a million times, guys, for all support on Patreon. Really appreciate it. Should be a link up here as well as down in the video description below if you'd like to look at supporting on Patreon. So, with that being said, let's get into the initial changes and talk a bit about the sims, and then we can listen to my take. I'm sure some will consider it a hot take on the changes and what it might mean long term. Alrighty, so earlier today, Blizzard did indeed announce, I think about 4 p.m. my time. I woke up at 2 o'clock and checked to see if there was a blue post up. There was not. I woke up at 4 o'clock to a lot of pings in Discord and a blue post saying that, hey, we're reverting the Destro Lock changes, or I guess not going forward with them. So, in response to player feedback, which there was a lot of, we have elected to not make the changes to Destro Lock this week, but we expect to adjust Destro as well as Survival Hunter the beginning of Season 4, and they wanted to say in April 20th tuning, they wanted to nerf Destro Lock and Survival Hunter. There was no Survival Hunter nerfs mentioned a few days ago, so this might be a bit of a miscommunication on Blizz's part. Maybe there's some Survival Hunter tuning coming, but hey, we might have also subsequently saved Survival Hunters. So if you're a hunter and you hate Warlocks, well, don't hate us, because we might have saved you guys too. So, now, there have been a lot of hot takes on this. Some people are happy about it, some people aren't, some people don't really care either way. Now, personally, I don't really run keys on retail anymore. I run some. I'm not pushing World First plus 87s. I really couldn't care less. I'm so in Dragonflight mode, but I still enjoy them from time to time, right? But the big thing, and the points that I brought up, there were two. Number one is that changes like this is not a minor nerf to some ability as changing our single target by 100 DPS. It's a substantial single target nerf in a very large AoE nerf, and a drastic change to a tier bonus as well, which directly affects Mythic Plus, keys that have been completed on retail, and the MDI. The MDI is coming up in a matter of, I think, 2 weeks or less, give or take. Teams have been testing, or I guess prepping routes based on comps and things like that. And a nerf coming out this week would indeed hit tournament realms for MDI and change up the entire meta there. And while that might sound exciting to some, changing the MDI meta, number one, there's always a meta. There'll just be a different class placing Destro Lock. But the big thing is that all the prep teams put in, whether it's pathing, routes, just polls made around, Destro CDs, would have to change. That's number one. And number two, to a similar extent, there have been a lot of keys pushed on retail for score, whether teams are going for the 0.1 title or just going to push score in general, that realistically cannot be done or would not be done if they, did not have that Destro Lock, that one Destro Lock, or that double Destro Lock damage profile, which is a bit of an issue. Now, if this change was made, for example, I have a list of all the actual class tuning that came out, over the course of this expansion, or this patch. If this change was made early on, let's say, I don't know, March 20th or whatever, here, basically, when the Destro buff came in, which this was wild in the first place. There was a bit of a case made for Destro maybe getting a bit of a single target buff, but a flat aura buff was not what we needed. I remember saying before this, they're going to aura buff Destro because they don't want, they aren't aware of the AoE. Lo and behold, they aura buff Destro. Immolation aura and Rain of Fire, all the AoE did not need a buff to any extent. You could have very well justified this 4-piece change on this date if people had known that Destro was as wild in Mythic Plus. About 3 weeks later, they tried to address the actual shard gen from the build because people saw it was so OP in Mythic Plus by, making this change to Inferno, now having a reduced chance to gen shards from more than 5 targets, which when this change came out, people thought the sky was falling. We tested it a bit. You could feel a bit of a difference in these types of scenarios, but it went from shard gen just being honestly permanently 5 shards, just spamming Rain of Fire over and over and over and over and over, to maybe having to conflagrate once if you got bad RNG, or like maybe put up a Havoc and conflagrate once or twice in a 10-second window and then still spam random fires. It's still degenerate. It was just not utterly busted. But even after these changes, I think it was pretty apparent that Destro Lock probably still needed a bit of nerfs and tuning. Let's be honest, Destro's needed some nerfs at AoE for a long time. I main the class, you know, and I've been saying it for a while. But I expected them to come in Season 4, not with a month and a half-ish left in Season 3, when retail keys have been done for a while. People have pushed for that .00001 title that 10 people in the world care about, and the, more than that care, I just don't have it. And the MDI is coming up soon. Now, the actual single target buffs here to Chaos Bolt, Incinerate, Immolate, and Conflagrate, these will not be going in. To a similar extent, the Blasphemy change will also not be going in. Basically, Destro, as far as your in-game gameplay, is going to be exactly the same as it is now, before the, basically before the changes were supposed to come in on Tuesday. Nothing's changing, everything's the same. Madness is still good, Soul Conduit's still good in single target, Wilfred's still on plus, nothing really changes there. So, unfortunately, the actual videos that came out over the past 2 or 3 days looking at Sims and stuff are sort of irrelevant. I was excited to play some Embers, maybe some Dark Soul play, some Wilfred's gaining some value. Well, just not being as bad as it was before in single target, but it is what it is. So this raises 2 questions. Number one, I mean, what happened to the AF changes? So it's coming in general, because there is a 5% buff coming in. But the big thing is, when these changes come in Season 4, is it going to be the exact same change? Or is it going to be a different change? Maybe looking at like Inferno, or looking at Rain of Fire, or Immolation Aura. Because I feel like if you can actively avoid nerfing the 4-piece, you probably want to go about doing that. It's not the fact that like the 4-piece is not broken, right? Destro during PTR, for the majority of PTR, had a really bad 4-piece. There was a random chance to get a random Chaos Bolt proc or a Rain of Fire proc, and it gave you an Infernal. But the Infernal did not bring Rain of Chaos. It was just mediocre in damage, and it was a random chance to get the proc. There were times on Cleave fights where I went upwards of 2 minutes without getting a single proc, and literally the next pull, we can watch it, our Pantheon testing. I got like multiple pulls back, or procs back to back to back in my opener. My damage was ridiculous. The bonus was bad, but it was changed based on a lot of player feedback. I don't think I was the one to bring up the 10 shard guaranteed proc and Rain of Chaos thing. I think somebody else brought it up, but I definitely backed that up. That was brought up after testing had been done for a while, and it was indeed changed to that. Now, I do feel a little bad in the sense about it being pretty OP, but at the same time, when it was changed, most of PTR testing had been done. I think the changes went in, and we had 2 mythic bosses left, being Halandris and Anduin. Halandris is in a completely different form now than he was. That testing was a complete disaster, which is a good thing, because that testing was bad. It went on to be one of the better bosses of the raid. And Anduin, testing Destro looked okay, but you couldn't really get very far into the fight, because it was wildly overtuned, and took a decent bit of coordination for what you had in an hour of mythic testing on PTR. So I feel like Destro's 4-piece sort of just slipped through the cracks, because I ran a key or 2 after it went in, and I remember saying this AoE is actually wild, but there really wasn't a whole lot of PTR testing left, and that's just sort of how things went. Then came the class nerfs to like Warriors and Shadow Priests and Rogues and Hunters and Boomkins. All the big class nerfs came in, but Destro wasn't touched. Demonology's 4-piece did not work like at all until like the last week of PTR. It was either broken, like in a ridiculous doing insane damage kind of way, or broken in a it does not function at all kind of way. And it did not work. It went through multiple phases of just not working for different reasons over the course of like the entire PTR. So Demo didn't get touched. Destro got reverted, or I guess changed, not reverted, and then didn't get touched. And AF, AF was bad, and also, as you can see, didn't get touched until later on. So I get the fact that Blizzard needed to make these changes, and I get the fact that this didn't make enough of a difference here, and this wasn't, something that should have really happened. But my main gripe is the time in which they ended up making these changes. So we'll talk about all that in a little bit. Briefly, though, I want to address these actual changes here, because as far as Sims are concerned, there's not anything like relevant changing as far as in-game DPS is concerned. But Sims might change over the next 24 to 48 hours a little bit, actually gaining raw DPS. Oh, and I also want to say for the record that I do think these single target changes, the Conflagrate buff, Incinerate, Immolate, and Chaos Bolt, they all actually are like relevant buffs to single target, and they go a long way, or they would have gone a long way, in helping to offset the actual loss of random chaos in single target for Destro Lock. Like looking at the sims, we might have lost like a couple hundred DPS, somewhere around there, give or take. It's hard to tell based on the infernal timing changes, which we'll talk about in a second here. But overall, I think they're solid. They're good. I mean, Roaring Blades ended up gaining more value than, you know, we thought it would. And just even like bringing up the actual Reign of Chaos builds, which were still a little better than Roaring Blades in certain settings, they actually almost hit the nail on the head as far as single target tuning. Probably was planned on going for Destro Lock with the Reign of Chaos change coming in. So this is my actual weekly sim. This is my current sim in game for Destro. I think I can gain like 100 DPS looking at something. But the big thing here is that there's a change being, I guess, messed around with a bit when it comes to Destro sims. Basically, there have been some changes made around your Reign of Chaos Infernals, your Blasphemy, where the duration was initially, it's been 7.9 to 8 seconds in Sims for a long time, but 2 nights ago, it was reduced to, I believe, 6.8, and that, from what I understand, is due to the fact that when your Infernals land, they land and then stand there for a second and a half and don't do anything. Then they begin generating shards, then they begin pulsing immolation aura and value and all that. So changes were made in Sims to try and address that. However, it was found a day later, apparently, that they actually last like 9.3 seconds. And that second and a half is offset by the increased duration, which isn't really mentioned. So in the weekly sim, this is the current sim I have in game. It's 8 seconds. In the nightly sim, I believe it is 8.6 seconds currently, roughly, on all these Reign of Chaos, Infernals, and Blasphemies. Yeah, right here. A lot less as well, because the nightly sim does not have these 5% or these changes in, but it does indeed have the actual 4-piece not giving Reign of Chaos. So you can see a lot more Reign of Chaos procs in the actual like weekly sim, which is, you know, before the actual nerfs. And the nightly one has a lot less because there's no 4-piece Reign of Chaos interaction. But the big thing here, there's 0.6 seconds more on each Infernal. So you might actually see when these changes like get taken out, I guess this change here, you might actually see a bit of a bump in your actual single target DPS as far as Destro sims are concerned, whether it be Wilfred's or Madness or anything really playing Reign of Chaos. The Roaring Blaze builds aren't really affected, but no one's really playing Roaring Blaze. So with that all being covered, I want to now talk a little bit about, I guess, the changes to Destro and other classes as well that have had these weird reversions in the past month or so, and why I think they're good and also a little concerning at the same time. Okay, so now, like I mentioned at the start of the video, there have been a lot of hot takes on, you know, these changes are good, or I guess, okay, the reversion. The reversion is good and the reversion is bad. And I think most of it just revolves around the actual timing of the changes being announced and then the reversion. Now, listen, I might meme Feral Druids and meme Boomkins and meme other, you know, subpar specs in the current patch of the game, but I don't want anybody's spec to suck, man. Like, having your spec suck, your class suck, the way you enjoy playing the game not being as good as somebody else, that just sucks, man. It makes you just not really want to play the game, right? And as far as like class tuning and things go in Warcraft, like there's always going to be some disparity between like the best class and the worst class for each scenario. It's just how it is. I mean, even look at Destro, Demo, and Affliction. Their toolkits are all built similar, but different. You know, Destro excels in like sustained mass AoE. Affliction can excel in sort of like on-demand, snap-y, burst-ish kind of AoE with Sow the Seeds, and Demo can excel in that really, you know, fast, like implosion snap AoE or a good single target damage profile, right? It's very, very hard to balance every spec and class in the game, DPS-wise, even healer-wise or tank-wise, with very little disparity between them, with basically just perfect equilibrium. It's probably never going to happen. Now, the unfortunate part is that when it comes to this patch, I mean, looking at both, like, this is Sepulchre, obviously Destro is pretty wild. Looking at Mythic Plus, I mean, look at the top comp here. It's Blood DK, Destro Lock, Surf Hunter, Fire Mage, Windwalker Monk, and Holy Priest. If you go to max, like, percentiles here, you basically have your 5-man comp being Windwalker, Holy Priest, Survival, Blood DK, and Destro Lock. And there is your probably, you know, arguably best comp, depending what you're doing. Priest brings PI, Destro brings insane damage, Survival brings insane damage, Blood DK, I guess, I don't even know what tank is good in Mythic Plus at this point, and Windwalker because of these sweeping buffs that they got, which also plays into this discussion a bit. Now, it's not just Warlock that actually had some changes coming in, you know, over the course of this actual patch. There are some classes that have gotten some buffs here and there, some minor buffs to certain abilities. Fire got buffed a bit, and to a certain extent, I mean, classes, some specs typically slip through the cracks as far as like being underpowered or underperforming on PTR, and they get buffed later on. But I feel like this patch, comparatively to others, has had a lot of larger changes, and a lot of them revolve around tier, which I don't want to say gives Blizz a pass, but it sort of gives maybe Blizz a bit of a pass. So the first one, I believe, was Guardian Druid, actually. It happened like right when the patch went live. Where's Druid at in here? It happened right when it went live. They had a 4-piece, I think it's their 4-piece, Architect's Liner, I believe. Yeah, I think it's this one. They nerfed, I think, the damage and the actual target, like, they capped it or reduced, like, square rooted it or whatever. This thing was insane. Like, Guardian Druid just beating everybody in Mythic Plus damage-wise. They do a huge pull, burst to a ludicrous amount of damage, and just destroy everything. Now, I'm pretty sure this was the case during PTR as well, but I think, but it sort of just went unnoticed, and I'm not sure if this is overhauled later on in PTR. Maybe somebody can let me know in the comment section, but it revolves around their 4-piece. And then we also had some changes coming about a month and a half ago, I believe, to Blood Decay, which I believe this was the change after the reversion. They ended up making a change later on, but the initial change was, I believe, like a complete change of their actual 2-piece or 4-piece, which people called for them to stop the change and, you know, called for reversions. Guilds are progging Mythic Jailer, they're working Mythic Plus. They had things already set out, and these nerfs came, I believe, like 2.5 months into the tier, roughly, being May 3rd, like 2 months roughly. Once again, being a tier bonus. And then we did see the Windwalker buffs, which is 20% to every basic ability they have with Windwalker, or for Windwalker, which is pretty wild. I mean, I can understand like maybe a 10% buff to an ability or two, but having a class be so subpar, you have to buff their entire damage toolkit by 20% is pretty wild. And this wasn't like a massive tier change. No reversions were called for here, obviously, because I mean, classes that are underperforming need to be buffed, right? This is a pretty large underperformance, which has catapulted them to being one of the better classes in the game for Mythic Plus, and not bad in the rate either. When it comes to Destro Lock, similar to Blood Decay, the actual 4-piece change. Now, if this had happened at a similar time to Guardian Druid, or if Blood Decay had happened at a similar time to Guardian Druid, right? The change, it sucks. Yeah, okay, obviously, because it's a tier bonus, and they're fun, they're exciting, you chase them, you acquire them, and you have this big power boost, and that's exciting. That's what you want. But at the same time, like, if changes this drastic are going to be made, they need to be made earlier on in the season. And I don't care if I'm a Warlock or a Druid or a Warrior. When the Blood Decay changes came out, I said that you probably revert them because of what it's going to do for the actual meta. And then lo and behold, Warlocks, the class I cover, has a similar thing happen, and I say it again. I'm not saying, oh, revert it because I want to be OP. Dude, I don't even play the game much right now. I mean, I play it, but I'm not doing plus 30 keys. I don't care a whole lot. I'm waiting for Dragonflight at this point. But the point that I want to drive home is that a tuning change this drastic, this late into the season, is not the best look. It shouldn't happen. Tuning like this should happen coming out of PTR, which, to be fair, once again, Destro's 4-piece got changed later in PTR. Might have been the same case for Guardian Druid and Blood Decay. I don't know. I don't play those classes. But tuning like this needs to happen much earlier in the season, whether you need to gather more data or monitor PTR closer or test with it more. I'm not really sure. But at this point, MDI is coming up. At this point, teams have pushed IO. At this point, teams are still pushing for that, you know, 0.1 title. And if you nerf a class that's being used in basically every group pushing for that title, some aren't, I'm sure. Some are full of ret pallies and doing incredible, I'm sure. But it makes it harder on them for literally no reason, because these changes are way too out of date. So I don't want to seem like I'm bashing Blizz on this, because I'm not. These changes need to happen. Destro's OP. It needs to be nerfed. It's going to be nerfed. But I assumed it would happen in Season 4 before it was announced a few days ago. And that's the main point I think people are having issues with. It's so late in the season that it gives both a message of Blizz is paying attention and wants to tune classes, but they're not paying enough attention, and the tuning is just way too late. So I mean, the way I look at it is a glass half full kind of thing. I'm hoping that when it comes to tuning in Season 4 and Dragonflight, there's an attempt made at a much greater equilibrium across the board. And once again, like, you're not going to have classes all being, you know, you're not going to have a 2% DPS disparity between the #1 big dog and the worst class in the game. You're never going to. Whether it's toolkit wise, there's a difference, or damage wise, or tuning wise, whatever. There's never going to be a super small margin of a super small difference, right? But what I'd like to see personally is, I talked about it a bit with somebody recently too, even with Max yesterday, and Dorky and Growl, was I would like to see a commitment from Blizzard for whether it's like bi-weekly tuning or realistically, like I think once a month tuning is not too much to ask for. Bi-weekly sounds fine too. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but at the same time, I'd like to see efforts made to bring up the very low classes. Let's be honest, like they buffed Warlock, and listen, putting Destro and Demo aside, like AF needs to be buffed, but people see, oh, Destro and Demo's good, why are they buffing AF? And that's a good question. You know, at the same time, if you have one good spec, why not? Because we're built around, oh, one spec is good, this whole class is good. That's the mentality of the whole WoW community, myself included, right? You know, Boomkin was great for a long time. Pharaoh was terrible. Resto still sucks, right? But I'm sorry, guys, but it's where it does. But I mean, you have that one spec and your class is godly, but that's not always the case. I'd love to see an effort made for classes, whether it's of Warlock or Balanced Druid or BM Hunter or Unholy DK, to be brought up to like that general equilibrium. There's always going to be an outlier or two, whether it's Destro Lock or Blood DK or Unholy DK or Shadow Priest or Rogue or whatever. There's always going to be a class that has a little bit more, whether it's damage or, you know, a relevant toolkit or utility or tank ability, survivability, whatever. But when that difference is like, you know, 2-3% versus 20 or 30, that's when the game is fun. Because when my spec is not good, I don't enjoy the game. Thankfully, I play a Warlock, I can play Destro or Demo and have a good time. But there's plenty of AF mains in my chat who have had a miserable time this season. They can't get in by the keys because they're playing AF. And when they get in, they get kicked because they see they're playing AF. I've heard a million things about Boomkins being terrible, and Holy DKs, BM Hunters, where are the Ellie Shaman at, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm a Warlock and don't nerf me. It's legitimately the one thing I really want to see. There's a lot for Dragonflight. But one of the bigger things I want to see when it comes to my hopes for Dragonflight is more consistent class tuning and more attention from Blizz. Whether it's, you know, there's a lot of feedback given every PTR cycle on class tuning, and they said they want to take more feedback into account for Dragonflight, which they have, to be fair. PTR this time around was very good. A lot of communication between the devs and the player base, which is very, very good. I think it's sort of on the player base as well as like Blizz for the Destro Lock 4-piece being a little OP. Changes came to it too late, but at the same time, like, there might have been some feedback that could have been given if we all played with it more, but that is what it is. You make mistakes, you live and you learn. But my big thing, I'd love to see just more communication, more consistent class tuning. I think back to 9.15 when Blizz mentioned they're going to look at addressing unused, underperforming talents for every class, and like nothing happened, right? Whether that was a pushback thing or I don't really know. But I think like bi-weekly or even like monthly tuning, if there was like every 25th of the month date-wise, there's a patch coming out or a post by Blizz saying, hey, in the next few days, next reset, we're buffing this class, this class, this class because of this, and we're bringing this down a little bit. I don't want it to be too excessive where it breaks the meta M+ and brings Destro from here to here, or, you know, Warlock from here to here. But a bit of a balancing act, a bit of, you know, equilibrium shifting would be fine. And I don't think it would take that much effort, because changes like this to Windwalker are a little wild. I think something like this is pretty easy to see during a PTR cycle. When it comes to Destro Lock, if we had it early on, I think it probably would have been seen as well. It was just one of those things where like it was just too much, but too late, and nobody really saw it. So the reversion is a good thing. MDI, score on retail. I would assume we're in S3 for probably season 3, for probably another month and a half. And season 4 is coming up soon. Destro will get nerfed a good bit, and we'll go from there. But making changes this late into a patch, I think overall is not very good for the player base. And like, I don't mean this in a rude way, but I've seen some things about like Destro Lock being nerfed and not being meta anymore means that my class will be good again in plus. Chances are high it won't be. Chances are high it won't. Because honestly, the next best class will take that spot too. And that's not your fault. And that sucks. I'm right there with you. That is a overall balancing thing. Like, just because Destro's getting nerfed doesn't mean Boomkin's taking its spot. Doesn't mean DK's jumping up there. Ellie, BM, Boomkin, Arms, Ret Pally, Rogue, Feral, they're not jumping the #1 spot. And it's really not going to end up giving more spots to plus, because that meta comp mentality, which I'm not a fan of either. I'd rather have, you know, 5 competent players doing a 20 than 5 flavor month rerolls that have no idea what they're doing. But that meta comp mentality is just here. It's a part of gaming. That's just what it is. But if there was more of an attempt at made it balancing classes, it would definitely lessen the overall meta mentality in Mythic Plus and Pugging at this point, I think. So Dragonflight hopes, just better class balancing, better class tuning, because the disparity we've seen in 9.2, credit where credit's due, tier bonuses are great. They're fun, they're awesome, they're exciting. It's the first time we had them in a very long time since Legion, and balancing them with Covenants and Soulbinds and Conduits and everything we have now, double legendaries, I'm sure is a wild ride for Blizz. Hopefully Dragonflight, when that all happens and comes out and everything, there's a much easier way to find that equilibrium between classes. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Now, I want to say this video, once again, is not any kind of bashing Blizzard video at all whatsoever. I just, you know, I'm hoping that looking at how things went this season and everything else, and the changes that are being pushed and then reverted for both Warlock and Blood DK and things, that they may be able to be caught and adjusted a bit early on as far as next season, I guess maybe Dragonflight and things are concerned. Like, tier obviously made things hard to tune. There's been issues with the Blood DK tier set, the Guardian tier set, the Destrolock tier set, and maybe a couple others either being underperformers or I guess overperformers, but I just don't think at this point in the season it's right to tune things this drastically. Whenever season 4 comes out, I mean, I expect the same changes to go in. They might even look at addressing it in a different way. They might just leave the Reign of Chaos part on the 4-piece and then just nerf other abilities like Immolation or a Reign of Fire or some kind of shard gen. I'm not really sure. Maybe Wilfred's nerfs. I don't want that, but we'll see. But the big thing is that if you do end up looking at nerfing things outside of the 4-piece, which nerfing tier is never fun because tier is something that should be fun to acquire. And when you get it, the class plays differently, different talents become better, and it just becomes more exciting to play, right? So putting it out in one state and then nerfing it and making it less exciting should be actively avoided, I feel, if possible. But at the same time, if you go in and nerf certain abilities like Reign of Fire and the ones we just mentioned, that means that whenever that borrowed power, the tier set, goes away, the class is just weaker as a whole baseline, which, if you look at how Destro has been over the course of the expansion, it's been bad up until this patch when you had a pretty strong 4-piece. It was played a little bit in 9.1, maybe a little bit in 9.0, when it came to those big Halls of Atonement, Necrotic Wake pulls in Mythic Plus, but that was it. There was never any Destro to this extent, and we can all agree it's a bit OP, but just in general, looking at the bigger picture, hopefully changes like this aren't needed in the future because tuning is maybe done on a more, on a bi-weekly, monthly, just more frequent kind of basis. So that's my hope, but we'll see. So any week ads, add-ons, or profiles in the video, once again, link to my Twitch down below if you want to grab them. They're all indeed available to you guys for free there. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions anytime. At the same time, feel free to do so. I also want to give one huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you a million times, guys, for all support on Patreon. Really appreciate it. If you're looking at supporting on Patreon, it should be linked up here as well as down in the video description below. And if you're down there, be sure to smash the like and sub buttons. It helps out a ton as well. Oh, and also if you want to discuss anything in this video comment-wise that I might have missed or drop a hot take down below, there's plenty of them, both good and bad. Feel free, and I will be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.